And in a world exclusive, Australia's Channel 7 will air a never-before-seen look at Meghan Markle this Sunday, featuring an extraordinary message from her family, including Thomas Markle, her dad, who I'm glad to report is re-finding his voice. So have a look at the bombshell trailer, which has just been released.
The world has never seen Meghan like this. The homecoming queen. The Markle family reunite.
This would be your last interview ever.
Treasured memories, home truths, and secret tapes are all coming out.
She would still be a waitress if it wasn't for Dad.
We're not going to go away. This is going to change everything.
They're really unhealthy for each other. It's a toxic relationship.
Dad's deathbed plea to the daughter he lost.
How can I fix this?
Thomas Markle didn't shout. He didn't rant. He didn't storm onto television waving documents like weapons. Instead, he did something far more unsettling. He spoke calmly, slowly, like a man who had stared at the same calendar for years and finally decided to say what he'd been holding back. And what he said didn't just poke holes in a rumor, it cracked open the entire timeline the world had been fed. He didn't say the personality was fake, he didn't even lead with the pregnancies, though those questions linger like shadows we'll come back to. He said something far simpler, far more dangerous. He said the age was wrong, not off by a year, not blurred by Hollywood vanity, wrong. And once that single number shifts, everything that follows it starts sliding out of place. Careers, relationships, narratives, the clock doesn't just tick forward, it rewinds. When fathers talk about their daughters, there's usually nostalgia in their voices. Birthday cakes, school photos, little moments frozen in time. But when Thomas spoke, there was no sentimentality. There was precision. Dates remembered not because they were convenient, but because they were lived. And that's what made it chilling. This wasn't gossip passed through friends of friends. This was a father quietly saying the world might have been introduced to the wrong version of his own child. Not just the wrong image, the wrong age. And once you hear that, you can't unhear it. Because age isn't flexible. Age doesn't care about branding. It just sits there stubborn, waiting to be counted. Thomas remembers his daughter before the spotlight hardened everything. Before cameras followed her expressions. Before royalty entered the picture. He remembers birthdays celebrated on time. School years that started and ended when they were supposed to. Life moving forward the ordinary way. So when fame arrived and an official story was handed to the public, something inside him stalled. The numbers didn't line up. The ages didn't land where they should. And instead of exploding, he hesitated. He spoke like someone correcting a clerical error, not launching an attack. Like a man saying, "This doesn't add up," and waiting for someone else to notice. But no one did. And that's where the real story begins. March 1997. A moment frozen in glossy paper and ink. Teenagers everywhere flipping through magazines on bedroom floors, dreaming of futures they hadn't lived yet. And buried deep in one of those issues, page 90, a list of names. Young women, aspiring faces. And there it was. Meghan Markle, age 21. It doesn't scream at you, it whispers. But once you stop and do the math, the whisper becomes a siren. Because according to the official story, she was born in August 1981, which means in March 1997, she would have been 15, not 21. That's not a rounding error, that's not a typo, that's 6 years. 6 years that don't vanish quietly, 6 years that demand an explanation. This wasn't a blog post that could be edited, this was ink, printed, distributed, archived, long before fame, long before palace statements, long before anyone had reason to lie, and that single number changes everything. Education timelines, career beginnings, the narrative of a young woman bravely breaking into Hollywood. Suddenly, it's not a teenager hustling her way up, it's a grown woman navigating an industry that punishes age mercilessly. So why was that number there, and why has no one ever explained it? Put the two versions side by side and the contrast is impossible to ignore. Version 1, the official one. Born August 4th, 1981. 44 years old in 2025. Polished, repeated, untouchable. Version 2, quiet, printed decades ago. Age 21 in 1997. That places her birth closer to the mid-1970s, which means approaching 50 today. That shift doesn't just tweak the story, it detonates it. It changes how old she was when she graduated, when she entered Hollywood, when she married Prince Harry. And then comes the question no one likes to linger on. How old was she when she became pregnant? Because math doesn't bend, and biology doesn't care about public relations. There's a clinical term doctors use. It sounds harsh, but it's purely medical. Pregnancy over 35, higher risk, more monitoring, more caution, already complicated. But pregnancy in the 40s? That's not handled casually. That's not candles and birthing balls. That's protocol, precision. And that's where the story begins to unravel. The hospital. The Portland Hospital isn't a fairy tale backdrop. It's a medical institution. Elite, private, governed by rules that don't flex for image management. And someone who worked inside those walls noticed something immediately. The public version didn't match reality. Prince Harry later described the birth like a wellness retreat. Calm, candles, 2 epidurals, a quick recovery. recovery, home in hours. To someone unfamiliar with hospitals, it sounds serene. To someone who understands medicine, it sounds impossible. Epidurals aren't stacked, they're continuous. Patients don't walk out minutes later. High-risk mothers aren't rushed out the door. That's not how hospitals function. That's not cruelty. That's safety. And when the insider heard the story, alarm bells didn't ring emotionally. They rang practically. Hospitals don't operate on poetry. They operate on procedure. And when a story doesn't align with procedure, it stops being a record of events and starts being a performance. There were candles, a calm room, birthing balls, a peaceful atmosphere that felt more like a wellness retreat than a hospital ward. He described 2 epidurals, a smooth delivery, and a quiet exit. According to the story, Meghan recovered quickly, and the couple were back at Frogmore Cottage within just 2 hours. It sounds perfect. Too perfect. Because hospitals don't move at the speed of storytelling, they move at the speed of caution. The drive alone takes nearly an hour, which means labor, delivery, recovery, observation, and discharge would all have to fit into the remaining time. That doesn't happen. Not after an epidural, not after a high-risk pregnancy, and certainly not after claims of preeclampsia. That condition changes everything. Blood pressure monitored constantly, magnesium drips, no early discharge, no mood lighting, no quick exits, none. This isn't opinion, it's protocol. Hospitals document, they wait, they don't gamble, and when every piece of the public narrative conflicts with basic medical reality, the question stops being, did something feel off, and becomes, what was being managed? One inconsistency can be dismissed, a handful can be debated, but a pattern? A pattern tells a story of its own, an age that doesn't settle, a timeline smoothed until it shines. A birth story that reads more like a script than a chart. Thomas Markle didn't sound vengeful. He sounded like someone trying to reset a clock. A magazine printed a number long before anyone was watching. A hospital insider pointed out rules that don't bend. And through it all, there was no clarification. Just silence. Maybe the story wasn't meant to be remembered as it happened. Maybe it was meant to be remembered as it needed to appear. Ink defines records, but pencil leaves marks. And once you tilt the page toward the light, once you notice the faint lines beneath the surface, you can't unsee them. And that silence is what keeps echoing. Not a denial, not a correction, not even a carefully worded clarification, just quiet. And silence, in stories like this, is never empty. It's full. Full of calculations, full of risk assessments, full of decisions about what's safer to ignore than explain. Because explaining would mean answering questions that don't stop at age. They spill into everything else. If the timeline was adjusted once, why wouldn't it be adjusted again? Hollywood has always been unforgiving to women as they get older. Roles disappear, opportunities shrink, casting calls quietly change their language. So shaving years off an age isn't shocking in itself. It's common, almost expected. But this wasn't a discreet tweak on a resume. This was a printed record from decades ago colliding head-on with an official biography that insists it never existed. And when those two realities crash into each other, something has to give. The official story stays polished. The older record sits quietly, unaddressed, like an inconvenient witness no one wants to call to the stand. And then there's the way the narrative was framed. Always flawless, always composed, always just a little too neat. From career rise to royal romance to motherhood, the story unfolded like a carefully edited highlight reel. No pauses, no complications, no awkward gaps where real life usually creeps in. But real timelines have friction. They have overlaps and delays and contradictions, especially when age matters, especially when biology is involved, especially when medicine doesn't cooperate with image making, and that's why the hospital details refuse to fade. Because hospitals are one of the few places where branding doesn't matter. Charts don't flatter, procedures don't bend, nurses don't rewrite protocols because someone needs a better story. They follow rules, they document facts, they don't care who you are. And when someone familiar with those rules hears a version of events that ignores them completely, it doesn't sound aspirational, it sounds staged. What makes this even heavier is the emotional contrast. On one side, a public image built on strength, control, and perfection. On the other, a father speaking not with bitterness, but with restraint. He didn't accuse, he corrected, he didn't embellish, he referenced time. And time is the one thing that doesn't get emotional. It just counts. Years pass whether stories keep up or not. And when a father says the calendar doesn't match his memory, it's not something you can dismiss as malice without evidence, especially when printed proof already exists, especially when no one has explained it away. And maybe that's the point. Maybe explaining would open doors that are better left closed. Because once you admit one adjustment, people start looking for others. They revisit old interviews, old footage, old timelines. They ask why certain milestones seem compressed, why transitions appear unusually smooth, why difficult chapters are summarized instead of detailed. And that kind of scrutiny doesn't just threaten one narrative, it threatens an entire carefully constructed image, one built on control, on precision, on appearing always one step ahead. But life rarely cooperates with that level of control. Pregnancy doesn't, aging doesn't, medicine definitely doesn't. The more you sit with it, the clearer the pattern becomes. This isn't about catching someone in a lie for sport, it's about noticing how often the story avoids mess, how frequently it opts for elegance over explanation. And elegance can be beautiful, practical, but it can also be strategic, especially when the truth is complicated, especially when the truth doesn't photograph well, especially when the truth raises questions that can't be answered without unraveling something much larger. Thomas Markle didn't demand attention. He didn't push the story forward aggressively. He placed it on the table and stepped back. And that's what makes it linger, because unanswered questions have a way of surviving longer than denials. And maybe that's why the discomfort hasn't gone away, because the math still doesn't resolve itself. The procedures still don't align. The timeline still feels smoothed, edited, managed, and when stories are managed instead of clarified, they don't disappear. They age, they deepen, they wait. Like pencil marks beneath ink, they stay faint but visible, especially when the light hits at the right angle. And once you've seen them, once you've noticed the lines that don't quite match the finished picture, you start realizing this was never about one number. It was about control over time itself, about deciding which version of the past the world is allowed to see. And time, eventually, has a way of pushing back.